Well, I'm just going to go over a couple of trades that I made, some Forex trades that I made last week, and then refer back to a couple articles on Ripple and the effect that I think it eventually will have on XRP. And I'll try to do more of this on or at least a weekly basis. Now, if we take a look at this first trade here I made on the Euro US dollar chart, 4 hours, I based it first of all on the overall sentiment. We see this downwards trend in the Euro US dollar, basically mainly off of US dollar strength. And I was zeroing in on the Euro US dollar chart in particular because the euro is overall weak because of its policy in general. Its overall dovish policy compared to the US dollar. And I didn't see any news at this particular time that was affecting the euro. So I paired the US dollar against that. Now, there were also technical reasons why I took it. I mean, mainly there was this area of support here that turned into resistance. So I was looking for an entry around here. You can see I took it. Now, unfortunately, I was stopped out. I usually place a stop loss above the high. Boy, I don't know why I did that. You can see that I got the overall trend correct, and I was going to take the trade off somewhere around this zero. What is it here? This is 1 point. Anyways, it was close to, this area here is close to a double zero number. So it would have gone well. Unfortunately, I was stopped out, but I had the overall direction right. Again, this strengthening here was a result of the ISM report that had come out earlier that morning. That I'm finding it hard to take the news trades in general, so I like to pay attention to the after effects now, and then try to get in on some sort of pullback or technical pattern that I see, and that just gives me a little bit more time to weigh the news and to understand exactly what's going on. So this general trend here was a result of a stronger manufacturing report that came out of the U.S., and this trend continued to carry on. So that would have been a great trade, but that happens. That's life. So I don't risk too much per trade, maybe about 0.5%, and then my risk to reward usually is about 1.5 to 2, sometimes 3 to 1. So I more than make up for it when I win. Now here's another trade here. I took off the 15-minute British pound US dollar pair. Now why did I, again, there's always an underlying sentiment or fundamental reason why I zero in on that particular pair. Why did I zero in on the British pound pair? It's because this part of the trend here was a result of, I think the pound, the Great British Pound was weakening because of the expected rate report that came out. Now the market wasn't expecting any change, and there wasn't. But what was different, and what did catch the market a little bit off guard, was there were two dovish dissenters, who wanted to actually vote for. Well, they did vote for a rate cut. So that scared the market a little, and we see as a result of it that the market trended downward as expected. Now I had to wait a little while, but the price eventually did reach my target, which was again another round number here, close to the round numbers where I got out. There's other things that I use to trigger a trade and to figure out an exit, but I'm basically looking for a fairly good entry with a good reward to risk. Now this wasn't the greatest risk to reward. This was close to a 1-to-1, maybe a little bit more like a 1.25 to 1. So not great, but I just thought that with the overall strength here that was conveyed by the dovish voters, that this trend would continue, and I was right. So those are just some of the reasons that I use to take trades on a weekly basis. As far as Forex, I wanted to just convey my thoughts as far as XRP and the lack of price movement. So we can take a look at some of the positive news that's coming out for Ripple. Ripple obviously is the company that has the most, I guess, interest in XRP as a crypto as a whole, but there's been so much positive news coming out from Ripple that you'd think that the price of XRP would start to inch up at least a little bit, but it's not as much of a surprise when you consider the other factors to why this isn't happening. So first of all, I think we have to take into account that XRP has moved up considerably more than a lot of the other coins when you take a more long-term perspective relative to 2017. It was one of the biggest, if not the biggest mover amongst some of the major coins back then. So a lot of the other coins in a sense are catching up. That's one point. The other point is that there isn't a new influx of investors. I think that's probably one of the key points. And I think that's what's needed in order to move XRP further. There's no way that institutional money would take a look at some of the news that was coming out from Ripple and not view XRP as probably one of the best or the best opportunities out there, if not the best. What we're seeing now, I think, as far as lack of reaction, one of the things we're seeing is just an immature market, retail market that is heavily hyped on Bitcoin, which has no comparative use value relative to XRP. I mean, I could obviously, because of it being a first mover, I'm not against Bitcoin, but because of it being a first mover, I think there's validity to it being a long-term store of value. But when you compare it to XRP and its use case and just the overall power of XRP compared to Bitcoin, I mean, I don't think there's any comparison at all. And there's no way institutions would overlook that fact. But we're dealing with an immature market at this point, and I think things are going to change once once we have regulatory clarity, and that's coming. So I think we're going to see XRP move far more than Bitcoin in the future. Also, other things to consider about the good news. This was interesting. I mean, just take a look at some of the things that are happening in regards to MoneyGram. So first of all, MoneyGram has increased the number of corridors. I believe it's between Mexico and the Philippines. And at this point, they're gearing up on the use of ODL, and again, that's a new acronym for what was previously called XRapid. It's known as on-demand liquidity. So MoneyGram is making more use of it as the days go by, and they're going to continue to increase the amount that money that they transfer using the coin. But we're only at the 10% mark. So anyways, this article here in Cointelegraph is slightly on the negative side, but I think that's not too much of a surprise. They tend to be skewed more towards Bitcoin and a little bit on the anti-XRP side. I think this article is, I find the Daily Hodl a little bit more objective as far as XRP, but again, I'm just gathering information as we go on here. So some of these news, some of these places that I refer to on the net are new to me too. So anyways, as I get to know them, I'll convey to you which of them I tend to think are the most objective and the go-to places for actual good information. Anyways, I'm going to continue this sort of just overall research and conveying this to you more so on a weekly basis. And also I'll include with that some of what I did earlier, some of my Forex trades. Thank you. Have a great week. This is John out. Take care.